Well, hello and good evening. My name is Murad Ouada. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Immigration Coalition and NYC Action, our sister organization. The New York Immigration Coalition is the largest and oldest immigrant rights organization in the nation, with the vast majority of our membership coming here from the city of New York. We are so pleased tonight to host the first New York City Council Speaker Candidate Forum tonight. And we are lucky to have all 7 candidates running for Speaker of the New York City Council join us as well. We have seen unprecedented attacks on our communities over the past 4 years. We've also seen this global pandemic ravage our communities. Now is the moment for our communities to come out and recover. And if we can't recover with everyone coming through, then the city will not be able to recover at all. So we're pleased to kickstart this event. We are starting a few minutes late, so we're going to jump right into it. I'd like to welcome all the candidates to the stage with me who are joining us. We are joined with council members Gail Brewer, council member Diana Ayala, council member Adrian Adams, council member Carlina Rivera, Francisco Moya, and Justin Brannon. Thank you all for making it out tonight. You have all been shared earlier today the rules of this forum. Please stick to your time limits, and we will begin now. We'll start with candidate opening statements. Each of you have 60 seconds, and we will start with Keith and work our way around. Go for it, Keith.
Good. Well, first of all, thank you for having us here today. I think this is our first forum together. Of course, nice seeing my colleagues all here today. I'm Keith Powers. I'm City Council member from 4th Council District, which encompasses the East Side, Manhattan, Midtown, Times Square, and of course, where I live in Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper, and really proud to be here. And thank you, everybody, for participating and joining us today. It's been a total honor for me to be the council member for District 4, which is a community where I was born and raised in. I'm a 3rd-generation resident of Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village. I grew up in a rent-stabilized apartment, and I still live here in the neighborhood where I grew up. And since I'll be quick, I've been really proud of the record I've had in the city council here to author legislation to prevent housing discrimination, to support local small businesses, to protect employees from workplace harassment, and to reform our criminal justice system. And I'm really proud of the work I've done as a chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, where we fought to close Rikers Island, to end solitary confinement, to push to remove the presence of ICE in our correctional facilities, and much more. And I've always been proud to be a strong supporter of ensuring that New York City is a bulwark against all the bad federal policies of the last few years, to be a sanctuary city, and to strengthen our laws to protect our city's immigrant communities, and to work on legislation at the city council to prevent those harmful policies from entering our city, including our criminal justice system. This is going to be really important as we go through the recovery, that we make sure that every single community has their voice heard as part of that recovery. It's one of the reasons I'm running for Speaker of the City Council. I should note I'm really excited about many of the new council members.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
We'll have more time to talk in a bit, but we want to give other folks the opportunity to introduce themselves as well. We'll go next to Francisco Moya. Unmute if you can. I don't think we can hear you just yet. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. Buenas noches y gracias. Thank you to the New York Immigration Coalition for hosting this forum and for advocating for our immigrant communities. I'm the proud son of Ecuadorian immigrants born and raised in Corona, Queens. I live and work in Corona, and I know firsthand what it means to be an immigrant family in New York City. So fighting and advocating for immigrant communities is part of who I am. It's in my DNA. And that's why I wrote the New York State DREAM Act and created the State Family Unification Project. I carried the green light New York legislation and have been fighting to protect immigrant workers and families from injustices since day one. In the City Council, as a member of the Finance Committee, I have prioritized funding for immigrant initiatives and organizations. I also supported the expansion of the street vendor licenses, introduced a resolution to tax the rich to fund excluded workers, and removed the word alien and illegal from the city charter and documents in New York City. I've worked at the federal level, I've worked in the state Senate and Assembly, and now I serve as a proud council member of one of the most diverse districts in New York City. I'm the only candidate for speaker who brings a deep level of state and city government experience with a legislative record of really working across the political spectrum.
Thank you. We're 60 seconds is up. We'll get right back to deeper questions in a moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to jump to Councilwoman Carlina Rivera.
Hey everyone, I hope you can hear me. Good evening. I just want to thank you for hosting this forum. I'm Carlina Rivera, born and raised in the Lower East Side, which is a wonderful part of District 2. And I would say that New York City is a city of immigrants. We're a sanctuary city. We wear that designation with a badge of honor, and it has to be our guiding light to lead a just recovery. I'm a proud Puerto Rican woman. I've always shown up for our immigrant communities. When your family comes from another place to seek opportunity, that comes with a legacy of experience that can be joyful and rewarding, but also racist, classist, and offensive. I know what it's like to be an interpreter for family in spaces where it is just not appropriate. And every issue is an immigrant issue, and we have to treat them intersectionally, not like an afterthought. And as your speaker, I will do this, not just because of this race or because of this forum, but because it's the right thing to do. And you can look at my track record. I've been providing social services and to our immigrant community since I was a housing counselor and community organizer at good old Lower East Side, when immigrant families in the East Village were being threatened with deportation, deprivation of services, frivolous litigation, and harassment. I use my platform as hospital committee chair to hold hearings on everything from maternal mortality and morbidity.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
To keeping ICE out of our hospitals.
I just want to make sure we're giving everyone a fair 60-second shot. Next up, I'd like to introduce Councilmember Justin Brannan. Timer is also at the bottom of your screen.
Got it. Thank you, Murad. You can hear me? You can hear me or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. I'm Councilmember Justin Brannan. I represent the 43rd District in Southern Brooklyn, the neighborhoods Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, Bath Beach, and Bensonhurst, where I grew up. And I'm proud to represent the largest Arab community in the city of New York. This community has really weaved itself into the complex fabric of my district, especially in Bay Ridge, where our avenues are lined with an overwhelming number of immigrant-owned businesses and several nonprofit organizations that have been serving Arab Americans and Arab immigrants for decades. My district is also home to a very vibrant and emerging Asian population, as well as an emerging indigenous Guatemalan and Mexican community, many of which are food delivery workers, and part of why I fought so hard with my colleagues to get those bills passed in the council. And I'm proud to serve this community and proud that its members are a part of what makes our district so unique. Because nearly 50% of my district is made up of people who were born outside of the United States, the immigrant experience in our city centers just about every decision I make. And I've been lucky to work closely with the New York Immigration Coalition on many issues, ranging from translation services at our poll sites to pushing back against the Muslim ban and 4 years of hateful politics of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Councilman Diana Ayala.
Hi. I'll wait for the timer.
Go for it. We'll start the timer.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you. And thank you for hosting us tonight. My name is Councilmember Diana Ayala, and I have the privilege of representing the 8th Councilmatic District, which is made up of East Harlem and the South Bronx. I've been the council member there for 4 years. But before that, I served as a staffer to Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, and pretty much started from the bottom up. I started in constituent services and worked my way up to where I am today. But my story is that of many New Yorkers. My experiences have shaped the way that I view government and how I expect our government to work for us. I was born in Puerto Rico. I was raised in NYC. I've been a single mother. I've lost family to gun violence and spent, a good part of my life in the homeless shelter system. I've survived domestic violence. And so I believe that my story echoes that of the lived experiences of many New Yorkers, including that of many immigrant families that live in my district. And it highlights the urgency for policies that we need to address. And I'm really excited to be here today. Look forward to talking a little bit more later.
Thank you so much. Next up, Councilwoman Adrian Adams.
Thank you so much, Murad. Thank you, NYC, for hosting us this evening. I'm Councilmember Adrian Adams, proud to present District 28 in Queens. Those are the areas of Jamaica, South Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, and Rochdale Village. I walked into a district that was in chaos, a district that was underrepresented by every means of the word. And I'm proud to say that I was able to make the invisible visible. Queens is the city's most culturally, religiously diverse borough in the entire city. We're the world's borough, and we are home to numerous immigrants. My district is no different. We're proud to speak over 160 languages in the homes of District 28. Those are the folks that I represent. I represent people that contribute to our economy, people that have not been appreciated for their contributions to our economy, leaders, health workers, teachers, people that stand next to me, food service workers, taxi cab representatives, and all. We bring that representative proudly to District 28. So happy to represent.
Thank you so much for your welcoming statements. We have Gail, incoming Councilwoman Gail Brewer, also with us, who's having some technical difficulties. We'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself when she's back on. I'd like for us to just jump right into our questions for tonight. And the order of the questions for this question, the order we will be going in will be Councilwoman Carlina Rivera, followed by Councilwoman Diana Ayala, followed by Councilwoman Adrian Adams, then Councilmember Francisco Moya, Councilmember Keith Powers, Councilmember Justin Brannon, and hopefully we'll have Gail back with us at that point as well. The first question is, New York City is lucky to have one of the most diverse immigrant communities in the country, with our residents hailing from dozens of countries and speaking over 150 native languages. The next speaker will play a critical role in addressing the challenges and opportunities that this poses. For example, we know that our Black immigrants suffer dual harms of a racist criminal justice system, as well as a racist immigration system, and that families that speak languages of limited diffusion have a challenging time accessing services in their language. In about 2 minutes each, can you share what are the 2 policy initiatives you will prioritize to serve and protect immigrant New Yorkers if you are the next speaker? You have 2 minutes to answer this question. And the first person up, Councilman Rivera.
Thanks for the question. It's important. Assuming we pass municipal voting before the end of this term, we'll need to ensure that all new voters, of which there will be more than 1 million, are engaged and supported in carrying out their civic duty. And to this end, one of the first policies that I'll prioritize is to guarantee language accessibility and cultural competency in outreach and education efforts. Leveraging our community-based organizations already on the ground doing the work, much like I did as co-chair of the census. And as I said before, every policy issue is an immigrant issue, and all immigrant issues are New York City issues. And so another one of my top priorities will be to ensure that we're funding the programs and the infrastructure that's necessary to allow our immigrant communities to thrive. And we might have, very little oversight on some of our immigration policy at the municipal level, but that doesn't mean that we can't do everything in our power to uphold our commitment to being a sanctuary city for immigrants. So as Speaker, I'll pursue a more proactive approach to the budget, ensure it reflects our values, setting forth budget priorities with the council that's going to strengthen our immigrant communities, free legal services for undocumented New Yorkers, funding excluded workers, to investments in, of course, affordable housing and public education. I think I've put forward a legislative record that also reflects the needs of our communities, and I'll continue to do that in collaboration with my colleagues, of which I'm very excited. We have so many incoming council members that have really prioritized these policies, and of course the things that affect our immigrant community.
Thank you. Next up is Council Member Diana Ayala.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think, I agree with Councilmember Rivera. Municipal voting is a top priority for me, and I'm hoping that, if it doesn't get passed before this year ends, it'll be, I would love to be able to reintroduce it again next year. Many immigrant families that are green card holders live in these communities. They have their children in our schools. They use our public hospitals. They frequent our local playgrounds, and yet they have absolutely no say in who represents them in local elections. So that's something that is really near and dear to my heart. But also, obviously, improving language access. Right, I see that a lot in my office. It's a huge problem citywide. I have a growing Asian community in the 8th Councilmanic District, primarily in East Harlem, and quite frankly, I am appalled by the lack of attention that has been paid to ensuring that we're communicating with all New Yorkers in their native language. We've worked very closely with several organizations to ensure that happens, but it's a forced conversation. I mean, you have people living in public housing. They come out, they come to a public meeting of all residents because they have no gas, and they have absolutely no idea what's happening because they don't understand the language. We know that they're here. We know where they live. We know the languages that they speak, and yet we're very ill prepared for them. So those are two legislative priorities that I would focus on.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up is Council Member Adrian Adams.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. For me, it is a very significant question. For those of us in Queens, we know what just happened with Hurricane Ida. We had people dying in Queens because of their living situations. Affordable housing is paramount to me, and it is a very big part of my policy platform. So I'm going to say that it will have to be the legalization of basement apartments and to end the demonization of those who live in them. Plain and simple. We've seen across the city people being demonized for the places that they live. For me, my District 28, we have always been dwellers of basement apartments, primarily families, immigrants, those that need affordable housing to live. We need to legalize that. I'm going to continue to champion that. We started it 2 years ago and the funding was taken away. We're going to continue to champion that with every fiber of our being, to demonize people that are living in basement apartments because of who they are is absolutely unacceptable to me. We're talking about students, single mothers, children, families, people that are working at Chipotle. I mean, for low income earners, affordable housing is what New York City needs. And for me, it's going to be legalizing basement apartments.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up, Council Member Francisco Moya.
Thank you. Look, obviously, if we're not able to discharge our city, our vote legislation, and get it done this year, then that would be my top priority. But really, it is getting a budget that is reflective of all New Yorkers, a budget that would that would be created to support our immigrant communities and give them opportunities to thrive and not just survive. We no longer have to be asking for crumbs, but it's now time that we ask for a slice of the pie here, because this is the city that was built on the back of immigrants. And I think that our budget is our greatest document of where our priorities lie. And for me, I think that we need to create a very equitable city where no one gets left behind. And we saw that during the pandemic. I was the epicenter of that. We need to close the digital divide in regards to both broadband and technology access. for immigrant and low-income families. We need to tackle the learning gap that was created by COVID for English language learners through specialized program and improving adult literacy, which is something that I've always supported in our budget process here at the City Council. These are the issues that matter for us in our communities, that saw the inequities that exist throughout this very rough period that we went through in the last 18 months. And that's where I would really prioritize my time in ensuring that we are protecting our immigrant communities here in New York City.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up is Council Member Brennan.
Thank you. I agree with just about everything my colleagues have said today. I think they're all important priorities. I think if we are truly a city of immigrants, then the immigrant experience should really center every decision we make as a city. Seeing our city through the eyes of a family that just arrived here, and what does the city look like to them? Language access at poll sites is something that I've been fighting for a long time, and we're still not there yet. Certainly, if we are able to get municipal voting done, then the logical accompaniment to that is going to be language access at the polls. I also believe that the Department of Education should be using its purchasing power to help students with religious dietary restrictions by ensuring that everyone that wants a kosher or halal meal can get one. We're still not there yet. I'm also proud to support Danny Drum's call for New York City to recognize Diwali as a school holiday. Festival of Lights is celebrated by more than 200,000 New Yorkers, and I think it would be a sign of solidarity that we get that done. And I would agree with Councilman Moya about getting municipal broadband done and creating a publicly owned municipal broadband network, as well as something like universal after school and universal daycare, which would greatly help our immigrant communities here. So those are just some of the things that I would like to prioritize.
Thank you. Next up, Councilmember Keith Powers.
Thank you. I mean, I have to add my support, of course, for municipal voting as a priority if we don't get it done this term, which I really hope we do. And to Adrian Adams, Councilmember Adams' point as well, I think on the basements and legalizing basements, I think she can speak more to it than I can even, but I think that's such an important issue. So we talk about a housing crisis as well that this city is facing. And I would add in, when we talk about it, as the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, we have been focusing on making sure that our criminal justice system is not participating alongside ICE. We've held oversight hearings in the last few months alongside the Immigration Committee with Councilmember Menchaca, where we focus on New York City's detainer laws. And we have 2 bills I'm the sponsor of that would limit the circumstances in which one can be held in custody and limits and ends communications between city agencies and federal authorities to strengthen our sanctuary city laws. So I want to make sure that we pass those laws this term if we can, certainly in the next session if they roll over. And I also want to commend everybody on this forum, because I think, as Councilmember Moya mentioned, our budget is such a big document for making sure that programs get funded. And I know the folks here have been fighting to make sure that critical programs in communities that really need them, immigrant communities, are getting funded. And as we roll into the next council, I think we have to make sure not only do we keep those programs in place, but we continue to resource them and make sure that we are funding programs that make sure our recovery is inclusive of every single New Yorker. And last, as we do the recovery, I want to make sure that we are building good paying jobs in all industries that can help every single New Yorker. And whether it is tourism and hospitality or making sure that we're helping, I have so many businesses in my district that are decimated right now. We offer opportunities for everybody, whether you came here a long time ago or you just showed up here today. And I think we have to make sure economic recovery is strong, builds good jobs, but also make sure it's a recovery for every single New Yorker. And I am looking forward to working with folks on that.
Thank you, council members. We're going to go into a semi-lightning round where you'll have 1 minute tops. Please stick to the 60 seconds that you have to answer these questions. This round is going to go in this order: Councilmember Brannan, Councilmember Adams, Councilmember Moya, Councilmember Ayala, followed by Councilmember Powers and Councilwoman Rivera. All right. So the first lightning round question, as you know, some of you have already mentioned this, the New York Immigration Coalition is co-chair of the Our City, Our Vote coalition, which is fighting for Introduction 1867 to strengthen our democracy by allowing 1 million New Yorkers who are green card holders or have valid work authorization to vote in New York City local elections. These New Yorkers legally live here, work here, go to school here, and are raising families here and deserve a vote on the issues that affect them and the direction of our city. The bill currently has an overwhelming majority of council support and just needs a vote in the council. Do you support Intro 1867, which many of you have already said you have? And will you commit to signing on to the memo in support of the motion to discharge on Intro 1867 put out by Councilmember Adonis Rodriguez? First up is Councilmember Justin Brannon.
I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I haven't seen the memo, but I'm assuming if it's about calling for its passage, then yes, I would support it.
So we can count on you to sign on to the letter of discharge.
I just need to see. I just need to see what it says. But yeah.
Okay, so I'm taking that as a confirmation. Thank you. Next up is Councilmember Adrian Adams.
Well, Rod, you're taking names tonight. I like that. I'm also a co-sponsor on the legislation. Really proud to do it too. We're talking about my constituents of the Great 28. You know, I co-chair the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus. We are a multiculturally inclusive body. So we're talking about the people that I support, that I represent, and the answers would be yes and yes. Take my name, Murad, write it down.
Thank you. I am sending it right over. Next up is Councilmember Francisco Moya.
Listen, this one's very simple because it's personal to me. This is for my mother. My mother has never had the opportunity to vote for her son. And my mom is a symbol of so many immigrants that are here that have worked to contribute to make this the greatest city in the world. I'm going to do this one for my mom and for the million immigrants that have the ability to come out here and really have a voice in what will be the greatest moment of their lives, to be able to vote and do their civic duty and really help shape New York the way they've always done. So absolutely 100%. This is for mom.
So yes to you're already on the bill.
Yes.
And yes to
Yes.
the discharge.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Next up, Council Member Diana Ayala.
That'll be a yes and a yes. Absolutely. And what a beautiful story, Francisco. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that, you know, most people don't really understand what it is that we're trying to do here. But we're talking about, you know, green card holders, people that are working and already contributing in their community and in one way or the other. And they contribute to the city's economy. And yet they cannot decide. They can't even vote for their own son in the city council. So absolutely.
Thank you. So we're counting you as a signatory on the discharge.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councilmember Keith Powers.
Yes and yes. I am a sponsor of the bill. I would love to see it get passed this term, and of course committed to bringing it to a vote in the next term as well.
Awesome. So we're counting you down as a signatory on the discharge as well. Thank you. Next up, Councilwoman Carlina Rivera.
Yes, of course. I would say, I think you all have seen me out there with you at press conferences, at rallies. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I've been a strong supporter since its introduction. I've been proud to join you all and the whole coalition, Our City, Our Vote, and you know, just over and over again. I think it's the right thing to do. Voting's a right. It's not just a privilege reserved for those in power. And many of our issues should also be treated as such, as rights, with spaces created and maintained as sacred and safe for people to exercise them.
Thank you. So we can count you as a yes on discharge.
100%.
All right. Awesome. I think we have 100% of the 6 candidates who are here with us signing on to the letter, which gives us more than what we actually need to get it done. So we're looking forward to your vote of support on the floor this session. I do want to note that Gail Brewer did reach out to me. She is not able to connect, so she won't be able to attend, but she will be sending us her answers to these questions tonight. So I appreciate her trying, and we've all had technical difficulties over the past couple of 18 months as we've been living through COVID and dealing with this. The next question, we have a 90-second limit, and we're going to go in the order that we went in the first round, which is Councilmember Powers, then Moya, then Rivera, then Brannon, Ayala, Adams. And the question is, in the last decade, New York City has made incredible strides in protecting and serving New York's immigrant communities, from historic investments in legal services and the implementation and strengthening of our sanctuary policy. However, we still have much work to do that every city resident who needs a lawyer in immigration court has one, and to reverse the racist policies that exclude New York City residents with certain convictions from receiving these legal services. How will you ensure that New York City remains a leader in investing in immigrant legal services without any exclusionary carve-outs?
Yeah, I'm up, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Look, that law to me was one of the landmark laws that has been passed in the last council, and a program that we have such an important task of making sure that we strengthen and uphold now and as we get into the next council. And for folks who are unfamiliar with that, that is making sure that we provide legal counsel to folks. And we've done that in a number of areas, but particularly for folks, immigrant New Yorkers here as well. Unfortunately, we have had fights with the mayor over who exactly should be covered by that law. And in my view, I think others share this as well, we should be making sure that everyone has right and access to that. We have seen over the last few years what it looks like when you have a federal administration that puts immigrant communities at risk and wants to do harm to those who call New York City or the United States of America home, no matter where they're from. New York has to be one of the strongest voices of opposition to those policies, and this is one way we can do it. We should make sure that any single person, no matter where you're from or when you got here, or even your conviction record, has access to that counsel. And I think as we get into the next council, that's going to be one of the things that we're going to certainly have a discussion about, is how we can strengthen that landmark law and build upon it and make sure we're providing access to counsel for anyone that needs it. So I think the policies have been misguided in the past to exclude certain individuals, and I will be looking forward to strengthening that as we get into the next council with all my colleagues in City Council.
Thank you. Next up is Councilmember Moya.
Look, to me, one of my proudest accomplishments has been to be the lead who created the funding for the New York Immigrant Family Unification Project in the state of New York. To me, legal services and resources are and have been a top priority for me. I live in a community that's predominantly an immigrant community. We need to reinforce that we have to have these services for those folks across the city. That's why I've partnered up with NYLAG, CUNY Citizenship Now, and so many others, supporting them with their legal services to help our immigrant communities. And of course, key to the city working with New York Immigration Coalition on that. But especially during the pandemic, I called on the mayor and the city council with Speaker Corey Johnson to secure money for the burial fund for families that wanted to bury their loved ones, that would have given them the opportunity to bury them without having to ask for their immigration status. These are the things that I've prioritized throughout my career, and it's something that I'm going to continue to do as the next speaker.
Thank you. Next up, Councilwoman Rivera.
Thank you for the question. I will certainly push the mayor to end the criminal carve-outs, to amend contracts to fund legal service providers who are representing clients who have been convicted of one of 170 serious crimes enumerated in the law. I will also use council funding with fewer restrictions to support, some of which my colleagues have mentioned, right? Legal service providers with cases that might be subject to the mayor's criminal carve-outs. And this can include targeted funding to support these clients that are left out of city contracts, but would need the mayor's support, or it could include broader funding to support the larger mission of these service providers and not tied to client deliverables. That always allows for more flexibility for staff to take cases that are very, very complex or would be subject to carve-outs. And so we have to prioritize the passage of right to counsel legislation also for people appearing in immigration court, and to keep funding some of our really important initiatives like Safe Passage.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up is Councilmember Brennan.
Thank you. Representing the largest Arab community in the city of New York has really meant doing my best to serve as a brick wall for the past 4 years of hateful policies that we saw from Washington. Certainly ensuring that immigrants have access to legal services is imperative, especially as it relates to our obligation as a sanctuary city. I think those two things go hand in hand. The work that we do with legal aid in my office and the work that we do with NYLAG is absolutely critical. Certainly in my area where I share a district with a congressperson that I don't feel comfortable sending folks to for immigration help, it's imperative that we have our own system here. So I would do whatever I can to expand it and to ensure that immigrants have access to legal services.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up is Councilmember Ayala.
Yeah, so I don't support the carve out, and I'd be curious to find out where I'm not sure where the new incoming mayor is on this issue, but obviously would be interested in having conversations with his administration about this. In the council, we've been very supportive. Obviously, I believe very strongly that it is important to access legal services, and we've done that through the city council by funding the Key to the City events and by funding the CUNY Immigration Services program, which connects immigrant New Yorkers to legal services. But I also believe that it's really equally as important to ensure that these services are being provided in the communities in need. We've made our offices open and available to ensure that an attorney is readily available to my constituency, and I think that is something that I would love to see expanded citywide.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up is Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you. Great question. My colleagues have answered, exponentially. It is very important that we do amend the carve-outs first and foremost, and we do need to strengthen our legal services. I want to make note that from day one that I stepped in the door of my office, we have provided free legal services, and the preponderance of constituents that we see are immigrants coming through our door. So much so that those services have remained throughout the pandemic. They expanded to Lefferts Library, where we do, like some of my colleagues, we have NYLAG, we've got CUNY lawyers in there to take care of my constituents of District 28. It's very interesting to note that these individuals, families, residents, battered women do not have any other place to go other than our offices, than my office, and services that are provided free to them still. And we want to expand that to them. We have to continue to offer these services. I would encourage all of my colleagues who don't do this to open their doors, expand their funding to free legal services for our immigrants across the city of New York.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. I'm going to add this question to the mix just because we have a minute or two, but extra right now. I think it's really important to ask because we're in, one of a pandemic that none of us ever thought we'd be living through. You'll have 10 seconds to respond, and we will go in the same order we just went in. Over the last 18 months, COVID has only exacerbated the deep, longstanding inequities facing our immigrant families and English language learners in our K-12 system. Even with millions of additional dollars from the American Rescue Plan, specifically for academic recovery, the de Blasio administration and DOE have not created immigrant or English language learner specific programs that could address the needs, as well as as a result, immigrant serving community-based organizations, which have very little resources or capacity, have had to step in and fill the gaps that DOE has left behind. We'll say 30 seconds each, and we'll be very strict on the 30 seconds. How would you hold the next mayor accountable to meeting the needs of immigrant families in our schools? And will you lead the council to invest in immigrant-serving community-based organizations to provide culturally responsive enrichment programs and information in families' home languages? We'll start with Keith.
Sure, thanks. I'll be quick because I know I got 30 seconds. Look, I think you guys nailed it. We have an opportunity here to use some of the federal funding to make sure that not only every single student who's playing catch up after the last year has a better opportunity to play catch up, but that's particularly for immigrant communities and folks where English language is their second language at home, that we are investing double in those areas. And our critical mission here ahead in the next few years is to help every single student play catch up. That may mean that we have to look at our public school system and push in more resources, push in more staff, and certainly work with the nonprofit providers to make sure they can provide those services. But we have to use federal dollars and prioritize that. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up, Council Member Moya.
Look, a major focus of my work at City Hall and in Albany has been on the needs of our immigrant families and students. I've said this before, we need to close the digital divide in all of our communities to ensure that all of our multilingual learners receive additional support to catch up after the challenges of last year. And what we saw was so critical that most of our children are being the translators for their parents at home. We need to provide our students and multilingual learners with the support that ensures that they can all succeed. And coming from an immigrant family, I know what that means. And so to me, this is a top priority for us to challenge the next mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up, Council Member Rivera.
Thank you for the question. Well, you know, the mayor has mentioned enhancing something like ID NYC and making our schools more culturally responsive to the needs of our immigrant communities. So these are all good things. But of course, we have to make sure that we're working with the mayor so that New York can continue to live up to our promises. So whether it's making sure that there is healthcare in our schools when that might be the only time a child gets to visit a healthcare worker, appropriate and culturally humble food, housing services, parental support, all of that has to be considered as part of our curriculum. And our community-based organizations have to be funded adequately. That's something I did in the census. We can't expect these communities to do all this work and not give them the resources they deserve.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up is Council Member Brandon.
Thank you. I think cultural competence, certainly as we, you know, Pandora's box has been blasted open here, and COVID has certainly exacerbated the things that we were somehow able to ignore, that now if we ignore them, it would be malpractice. So before we stuff everything back in the box, we've got to fix it. And certainly in our schools, what we've seen through COVID, and this one-size-fits-all approach has just failed our kids. And whether it's Ls or students with disabilities or students in temporary housing or the children of essential workers or those with home situations that make remote learning difficult or not possible, we have to prioritize these kids going forward.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up is Council Member Ayala.
Yeah, I mean, cultural competence is obviously is important, and I remember being that child, Francisco, where, you know, I would go with my mom, you know, to an HRA appointment, and I would have to translate for her for many, many years. And that's how I learned English as a child. But I believe that, you know, we do things backwards in the city, and we just really need to prioritize putting the resources and allocating the resources in proportion to the need, right? And doing that in a way that adequately funds, you know, institutions that already have built trust, right, in the community that they represent.
Thank you, Council Member. Next up is Council Member Adams.
Yes, thank you. You know, we speak a lot about the negative that COVID has brought to us. I'm looking at this from an educational perspective and from an educator's perspective here. This is a tremendous opportunity that we have coming out of this pandemic and presenting this as a curriculum and expanding it to families, not just to our students in schools. English language learner programs need to be expanded. I do this in a few of my schools in my district, not just to the children, but to the families. We have seniors that are learning English right now in the same schools that their children are taking classes. We need to expand it to the children, yes, but to the families so that we can come out of that child translation into the big family picture of English language provision.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, so we want to give everyone the opportunity for a closing statement. And some of the folks who will be able to make you all the next speaker are watching. So we want to give you each 2 minutes. Please stick to the 2 minutes. I will be doing quick enforcement because we want to get everyone to be able to give their 2-minute pitch. And this is our closing statement section. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Manhattan Times and the Bronx Freedom Press, Bronx Free Press. I appreciate their support and their partnership in this effort. The order we will be going in is Councilmember Rivera, Ayala, Adams, Moya, Brannan, Powers, and then we will be closing up for the night. So we will start with Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm very proud of my record and what I've been able to do with people who are leading this movement and people with lived experiences. Under the previous federal administration, immigrant rights were actively and violently attacked at every opportunity. And as a 2020 Census Task Force co-chair, I successfully fought, along with many, many others, against the administration's intent to include a question on citizenship status on the census. I also took action at the city level to address the Trump administration's public charge rule, which threatened to block immigrants from accessing public benefits like Medicaid and SNAP benefits, food, or public housing. And by requiring New York City schools to really educate immigrant families on what it means to protect their benefits. That's our responsibility. As chair of the Committee on Hospitals, Language Accessibility, Cultural Humility, that's been one of my primary focuses. And I held an emergency hearing to keep ICE out of hospitals in March 2020. In 2019, I visited federal court with Safe Passage to witness unaccompanied minors' hearings, where we even intervened to connect children without legal representation to Safe Passage. And this doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the countless rallies I've attended, the bills that I've sponsored, the letters that I've signed, hearings held in defense of immigrant rights here in New York City. And it doesn't even cover all of the highlights of my last 4 years. And I've always been a champion for immigrants, even before my time as council member, when I worked as a housing organizer in my community. I'll look beyond banner issues like legal representation and ICE, because I think any effort to address the needs of our immigrant neighbors has to include better schools, safe communities, affordable housing, and accessible healthcare. I will continue to fight for our immigrant neighbors as your speaker. And I want to thank you all for this opportunity tonight. It's a very privileged space and I'm honored.
Thank you, Councilmember Rivera. Next up is Councilmember Ayala.
So I'm Councilmember Diana Ayala, and I proudly represent a district that is rich in diversity. And with that have come challenging times. And I've seen firsthand the impact of illegal, displacement, of food insecurity in the district, and really the repercussions of poor policy choices. I've worked really hard, to fight against that displacement, and worked really hard this past year throughout the pandemic to create a specific fund to help small businesses that specifically included food vendors, street vendors that didn't qualify for any other government aid. And I, quite frankly, I look forward to working with all of you and using your expertise to help inform future policies. Thank you for having me. It's been a tremendous pleasure, and I look forward to coming back.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Ayala. Next up is Councilmember Adams.
Thank you so much, Murad, and thank you again, NYC, for hosting this important forum tonight. I'm Councilmember Adrian Adams, proudly presenting the Great 28, in Queens. You know, my district is very, very, it's very important to me. One of the most diverse places on the planet that really had no representation before I came here. I represent Indo-Caribbean, I represent Chinese, I represent Latino, I represent African American, and so many more. We have made the invisible visible, and I'm very proud of that, by the implementation of Little Guyana Way, one of the biggest accomplishments here in Richmond Hill, Gurdwara Street, and so many more that we've done just to bring our culture and the vast diversity here to the public sphere. It meant so much, and still does, to my population here. We also have made possible the services that I spoke about, the legal services. We want also to make sure that Diwali, as was mentioned, is a holiday. We've been fighting for that for years. We want to make sure that we have meals that are appropriate for our children, that we have halal meals, that we have kosher meals, meals that are vegetarian meals in our schools as well, that we take care of our taxi cab drivers that have been fighting on a daily basis for equity, many of whom are my constituents right here in District 28. We were the last to get COVID testing and one of the first to spike higher than any other district in the city for COVID. We brought that percentage down because we fought again to bring in the vaccines to District 28 because we were tired of watching our relatives and loved ones perish because of this pandemic. We were able to bring unprecedented food into food pantries and fund them, bringing unprecedented PPE to places that never had it and needed it. We will continue to do everything that we can do in our power to make sure that our immigrant communities, my brothers, my sisters, are taken care of in District 28 and in the city of New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Next up is Councilmember Moya.
Thank you. Thank you again for hosting. I'm Councilmember Francisco Moya. I was raised in a community of immigrants. It's who I am. It's in my DNA. My upbringing provided me the best hands-on education that a child could receive. Look, I learned about cultures, food, religions, and the hopes and dreams of my neighbors from around the world by just simply walking out my door. My dad, he cried on the day that I got elected. That day was the day that I became the first Ecuadorian American to ever be elected to public office. And I believe that it was the fulfillment of his hopes when he came to this country, when he took on this very courageous journey to move to this incredible city. And I've never forgotten where I came from. I've been fighting for the rights for immigrants my entire career. I've championed the New York State Liberty Act to make New York State a sanctuary city. It is now called New York for All. I carried the project for Green Light to grant access to driver's licenses for all. But we need a speaker who can really bring together a city to help rebuild back the devastation of the pandemic. We need a speaker who knows the immigrant community firsthand because I lived it. We need a speaker who can collaborate across the political spectrum to improve communities. And we need an experienced leader with a pragmatic solution on how we can collaborate with the mayor, the governor, the advocates to solve our complex problems. So I feel I'm the candidate that has had a successful career in Albany and in City Hall. And that's why I think I'm someone who can be trusted at his word. We are a city of immigrants, and like my father in his journey, and like my mom herself like to say, we need to rebuild our city and remind everyone that this city was built on the backs of its immigrants. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I thank my colleagues too for being here with me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Councilmember Brannan.
Thank you, Murad and NYC, for putting this together. And obviously, it's great to see all my colleagues. You know, I often think of my grandparents who came from Italy, off the boat, scared to death, just some lint in their pockets and a humble dream of a better life. People spat at them, made fun of their broken English, their olive skin, and the food that they ate. And it wasn't that long ago. Unless you are indigenous, it's important for us to remember that we all came from someplace else. A few generations pass, and unfortunately, we all start acting like we own the place. And I think that's why it's so important for New Yorkers to remember where we came from. And being a leader means knowing when to listen. And that's what I've always done. My ear is always to the ground. I'm always learning. And if we are truly a city of immigrants, then the immigrant experience should center every decision that we make as a city. If for the family that just arrived here, what does the city look like through their eyes? And when a new immigrant walks into the office of a city agency, are they greeted by someone that looks like them and speaks their language? Because they should be. So how do we make their life just a little bit easier? How do we ensure that they can harness the promise and the possibilities of this great city, just like those who were born here? Because I don't care if you've been here since birth or you've been here since breakfast. Our city needs to roll out the red carpet for you. And I'll do everything in my power as speaker to ensure that our immigrant communities are heard and that their voices turn into policy as we move our city forward and we recover from this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brennan. Next up is Councilmember Powers.
Thank you. First of all, thank you again for getting us all together and talking about issues that are going to be so essential and important in the next few years. And as we, as a city, are navigating enormous challenges in the years ahead, it's really critical to me, and I know to everyone here, that we're bringing issues impacting New York's immigrant communities to the forefront. The pandemic has exposed the deep and dividing inequalities of the city, particularly when you look at healthcare, housing, employment, education, and many other issues. And with the new administration and then the new council, I think we're going to have tremendous energy around how to address these challenges and how to build back the city stronger and better than ever before. And I am very, very excited about many of the new council members joining us. They're making history, they're innovative, they're diverse, and I know they're ready to roll up their sleeves to take on the challenges that are ahead of us. And after spending a lot of time with any of them, I can tell you they're going to hit the ground running on day one. So there's going to be a lot of focus on the next mayor, but of course we also have to focus on the city council, which is really one of the most important parts of our city government. And we're going to have a role here in making sure that we can solve problems, improve people's lives, and get our city back up and running again. And that's what the challenge of the next speaker is going to be, and that's certainly why I'm here today. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us to create new opportunities when it comes to recovery, in the recovery, to create housing, to do better social justice, to create employment activities, and much more. And we're definitely going to mean looking at and working with our immigrant communities to make sure that recovery centers them and make sure that we are building around those communities. And so there's a lot on the line for the future of our city right now and in the next coming years. And I think we need to all roll up our sleeves and get to work to help every single New Yorker. And so I will leave it at that. I just want to say thank you again for having us. And of course, thank you to my colleagues for being part of this and being part of a conversation about the future of our city. And I really look forward to working alongside the new colleagues and everyone here to make a better New York City in the years ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you to everyone who's watching at home or in their offices. We look forward to working with the new council, which is coming in as one of the most diverse councils ever, one of the most women ever elected. We are in a very amazing, the city has transformed and so has our council. And we just want to make sure that as we're moving forward and with our new class of 2022 council, we want to make sure that our community is also uplifted in this moment. We want to thank everyone for really making the time today to be here, but also your commitments to ensuring, if you win or don't, your commitments to ensuring that immigrant communities will be lifted up and invested in, because our collective is incredibly important to ensure that we move forward to recovery with everyone included. Thank you to our sponsors tonight and our partners, Manhattan Times and the Bronx Free Press. And thank you to our sister organization, NYC Action. Have a good night, everyone.